It is great to see all of you here. Good morning, and welcome to the Fall Leadership. We're not calling it a meeting, we're calling it a retreat, which allows me not to wear a tie, so that's helpful. Yep, Bob, you can take it off. Rob, Tom, you want to take off the tie? That's perfectly okay. Ben, you can keep your bow tie on. It's okay. Looks good. I'm Ashish Vaidya. Thank you so much for taking the time. As I was reflecting on that, this is a very expensive meeting. We have 6 hours of time together, but it's well worth it if we hopefully achieve the outcomes we've set ourselves to do this morning. So I'm really glad to see all of you here. You've seen the outcomes of the retreat. I don't know if we have extra copies of the agenda on tables. We're trying to accomplish 3 things today. Number 1 is to understand and align as a community around our meaning for existing. Why do we exist? Which is, of course, student success. And we've talked a little bit about the focus on access, completion, and career success. We'll certainly be discussing some of that. Who are we? What value do we add? Is one of our first objectives. Second is to understand a common purpose about our future. Who do we aspire to be as an institution? And then the third one is to understand and embrace the opportunities inherent in designing an institutional strategic framework. We had that discussion at the fall convocation when I talked about how do we actually move forward at this. Our current strategic plan was a 2013 to 2018 plan. It sort of sunsets at the end of this year. We have to begin that process going forward. We're taking a very different approach, a rather unusual and different approach to making that happen. And so I'll talk a little bit more about it at the end when we get into that piece of the presentation. And really get some feedback from all of you on that process. So we'll spend some time discussing that. Before we move on to the panel, we're doing a couple of things differently this year. We have 2 panels that we will be introducing you to. In just a few minutes, we'll have our community panel that I'll have them introduce themselves in just a second. And of course, we'll have a student panel a little bit later on during the day. And then over lunch, I think we'll get a chance to synthesize what we heard from those 2 panels in a way that I think might be helpful to us before moving on to some of the other aspects of the agenda. And I won't go through all that in some detail. Now, we don't have the time. Clearly, we have, I think, close to 100 people, if not more, that have RSVP'd. I know some people will come and go depending on schedules. Some folks are expected to arrive a little bit later on, and I completely understand that. But we won't have time if we go around the room and have everyone introduce themselves. We'll probably be here till 2 o'clock, so that wouldn't be helpful. So I thought we would do a couple of things. I was explaining to our community folks, who's in the audience, what's the purpose of this meeting, and we just went a little bit over the outcomes. But what I said is that this is a gathering, and it's just been apparently things we've done for the last several years, the Fall Leadership Group, and the key elements we have, of course, our members of the cabinet, deans, VPs, but we've also included the department chairs, including leadership from both the Faculty Senate and Staff Congress, the associate deans, and we've also, I think, hopefully have our student government members here. I know, Matt, I can see you here, and I think Hannah will come a little bit later on. So we're trying to really say that this, I think, in this room, we have clearly the key movers and shakers, influences of this process. So in a way, this sets the stage for the soft launch, if you will, of our strategic framework building process. And of course, we have a lot of work ahead of us to do in terms of including the rest of the campus and the community in that effort. So we'll get to that. But what I thought I would do is, just to get kind of the ball rolling is here, I'm going to call out certain groups. And if you are a member of that group, I'd like you to stand briefly, and then you can sit back right down again. So let's start off. If you have been at NKU for over 25 years, please stand. I think these people deserve a round of applause, don't you think? They have been in existence for more than half the life of the university, so that is wonderful to see. All right, if you have been at NKU for over 10 years, but less than 25, more than 10, less than 25, please stand. Very good. I think an applause for this group, too. That's pretty good. All right. If you have been at NKU for between 5 and 10 years, the somewhat newbies, 5 and 10. People are figuring out in their heads. Thank you. Okay, how about those who've been here for between 1 and 5 years? 1 year and 5 years. Very good. Welcome. It's a bigger group than I would have thought. Matt, I'm glad you stood up for that. Yeah, if you were the 5+ years, I'd be a little worried. I've been here 10 years. Oh no. Okay, and for those who have been here less than 1 year, please stand. Less than 1 year. Hey, me too. These are our brand new folks who've joined the team. Welcome, of course, to each and every one of you, but especially our new members. So thank you. A last couple of one. If you have at least one degree, credential, or certificate from NKU, please stand. Look at that. Excuse me. All right, and for the final group, if you are responsible for student success at NKU, please stand. Thank you so much. On that wonderful note, may I please invite the panel to come on stage, please? So again, thank you all for being here on this panel. And we made it a little bit more formal than I would have liked, but that's okay. It's out there. So just to recap again, the purpose of this panel is to better understand the perception, hopes, and aspirations and expectations of some of our key constituents from their lens, from their point of view. These are folks, obviously, from the community. As you saw, many of them have an association with NKU in different ways, in multiple ways. So I thought what I would do is begin by simply having them describe themselves, their position, their role within their organization, and then to tell us a little bit about both their personal and or their organization's engagement with NKU. So Josh, I'm going to start with you on the far end there.
Hello, good morning. I'm Josh User, founder of AGAR. We're an experiential agency. We believe as the world moves more and more digital, the value of human interaction and conversation inherently increases. I'm a graduate of 2001, communications degree, and I sit on the alumni board currently.
Good morning. I'm Jill Meyer. I'm the president and CEO of the Cincinnati USA Regional Chamber, which covers our 15-county MSA, so Southwest Ohio, Northern Kentucky, and Southeast Indiana. We are focused on building the vibrancy and economic prosperity of our region. So students, campus is critically important to that goal. And I am a graduate of Chase Law School. I won't say what year, but I'm a proud grad.
Well, first of all, thank you, Jill, for starting am I on here? Not saying the year you graduated, so I'm out on that too. But my name's Mary Zala, and I am an NKU grad. And I'm global president of the consumer brands business at Landor Associates, which is a brand consulting and design firm. Many of you wouldn't necessarily heard of us because we are, in some ways, a business-to-business type brand, but we show up in many of the brands and products that you probably see and use every day. Any Tide package, any Old Spice package, mac and cheese, the BP and FedEx logos. Those are some products of Landor, and thanks for asking me to be here today.
And good morning. I'm Rhonda Whitaker with Duke Energy. I'm Vice President of Community Relations for our Ohio and Kentucky operations, and go way back with NKU. When I started in my role, which was formerly the Director of Government Community Relations here in Kentucky, I also at that time joined the NKU Foundation Board and served on that for many, many years. I think they finally decided a couple of years ago, wow, her term should have been up a while ago. But Duke has had a long-standing relationship with NKU. I look around the room and I see many in this room that we've partnered with, from Madeira with SinSam, and Adam with Government Affairs. Mary Paula, we've worked on an awful lot of projects with the growth here at NKU. We always have those challenges with our facilities that run right smack through the middle of campus and the growth here. But of course, Duke is in the energy industry, right? And we're one of the very top utilities, one of the largest utilities in the country. And so for us, the collegiate, where we're going to draw our employees from, the collegiate experience is very important. And so we'll talk about that a little bit today, but also want to just thank all of you for what you do here for our workforce. I'm also heading into my last couple of weeks as the board chair of the Northern Kentucky Chamber. And one of the things we've launched this year is a new workforce effort called Grow Northern Kentucky. And I'll touch on that a little bit later too. So thank you.
Good morning. My name is Sarah Jo Londo. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer of St. Elizabeth Healthcare. And we have partnered with NKU in many ways. Most recently, the announcement of the medical school with UK and NKU, which is very exciting. What we're very interested in is making sure that we have the clinical and medical professionals to serve the healthcare needs of a growing population. Thankfully, we're in one of the highest growth areas in Kentucky, either highest growth in greater Cincinnati as well in Boone County. And so we're very excited with that partnership. I'm thrilled to see the opening of the HIC. It's a beautiful building. The centers, I should say, because it's 2 floors now, are just the most remarkable simulation centers anywhere in the nation. I think NKU and St. Elizabeth should both be very, very proud of that work. So we're looking forward to partnership not only in workforce needs that we have, in clinical research opportunities that we have, and in further just growing the vibrancy of Northern Kentucky together.
Very good. Well, thank you all for that introduction. I really appreciate, again, your time and effort. And we're going to try and sort of have a conversation and not just sort of a very, so feel free to jump in and respond and react. We have, I think, until about 9:15, because I know your schedules are pretty tight too, and we have a full agenda. And I'd like to keep maybe about the last 5 or 10 minutes at least for questions from the audience. So we'll get a chance to do that. So I'm going to try and keep the time, and maybe someone here, Ben, can give me a little wave to make sure we're on track. So let me start off with sort of a general question, and this is really for the entire panel, and maybe each of you can take a few minutes to address this. I want to discuss the value proposition of college in general and NKU specifically. We hear, all of us hear a great deal about this sort of national, perhaps rhetoric about, you know, is college even worth it? Why should we go to college? I can safely say there's a lot of negative elements which I would never have imagined several decades ago about college in general. I mean, a lot of criticism, some of which is, I think, quite valid, but some of which is really hard to really comprehend from some of us in the academy to say, what is all this about? I mean, so maybe you can address that aspect a little bit, this whole notion of why is there this uncertainty in this value proposition, and then specifically about NKU. And then I'd like to maybe ask you to talk a little bit about how do you view NKU's brand? And I certainly think that each and every one of you has a very good perspective on thinking about that. So maybe we'll start that question, and Sarah, if I can begin with you.
Sure. I may be a traditionalist, but I'm a big believer, and I have just sent an 18-year-old off to college, and you know, he's not ready yet to contribute to the world in the way that he needs to. He needs socialization. He's grown up in a digital world. He needs to understand critical thinking. He needs to understand individual problem solving. To me, the university setting is not just about the education that you're getting in a specific subject area, but it is a coming-of-age experience. It is shaping you as a human being, helping you decide how to make choices, how to relate to others. And I know Josh will talk about human-centered design and all of the things that his firm is very good at. That is critical, and I think in our youth, somewhat missing. I mean, I was surprised at freshman orientation when they're at MIT talking about, oh, and we have people here that can teach you how to launder clothes. I thought, good Lord. Have we really coddled our youth to that extent? All of you that are faculty members here probably can say yes. I'm sure that you've seen it. I know in my experience at Deloitte Consulting, I once had a parent that tried to attend a performance evaluation with their child, and I thought, a little helicopterish. So, I think we have a responsibility to shape adults who are going to lead our future, and I think that's important. I grew up in Cincinnati. I have to say I knew nothing about NKU growing up. It was not even, I also knew nothing about St. Elizabeth growing up, just to be fair. You kind of stay north of the river and you don't really think about NKU, other than I always considered it a commuter campus. I was so pleasantly surprised 9 years ago when I joined St. Elizabeth to find out all of the unbelievable programming and the vision of, at that time, Dr. Vitruba had for this campus. Was so impressed with really seeing the future in terms of informatics and the intersection with interdisciplinary studies and health. The HIC will deliver that, and we need that in our field. That is where healthcare is going in terms of no longer a physician just telling everyone what to do, but a team of clinical professionals working together on behalf of the patient, again, putting the patient in the middle of all of that to make sure that they have clarity. So to me, that's the role of NKU. I think the brand has really been synonymous with innovation in our region in terms of academic institutions. I can't really think of another academic institution in our region that has been more closely associated with it. So that's how I would see the brand as it stands today.
Very good.
I'll jump in, yes, and wow, that's hard to follow, Sarah.
I always like to go first in things like that.
First of all, I agree with all of that because I also just sent an 18-year-old off to college, and exciting times for them. But it is important, I think, for students to understand when they're in college, it's not just about learning that technical expertise, whatever that might be, but it's also about the problem solving, the creative teamwork, all those soft skills that are important to businesses. Whether the student comes out with that degree, well, that's important, but they've also got to be able to communicate, and they also have to be able to understand what a team environment is. So all of that is critical in addition to the degree that they might have when they leave your institution. The other thing that I would add is just that even in our industry, technology is advancing so rapidly. Things are changing greatly. Many of you, I assume, may be Duke customers, and I hope it hasn't been too painful, but many of you have gotten a smart meter. And technology is advancing, and we're trying to give our customers more opportunities. They're asking for more opportunities to better understand their usage, for example, or how they can bring on smart appliances and understand the use of those appliances and saving money. And things are changing at a much larger landscape, whether it's looking at solar, looking at battery power backup, and just all kinds of technology in our industry that we're going to see change over the next 10, 20 years. So having those with technical skills and abilities is very critical. The other big thing I would say, and with the Center for Informatics, cybersecurity, it is huge, right? It's huge in the banking industry, it's huge in our industry. I'm not going to tell you the number, but let me tell you the number is really big at Duke Energy. We serve over 7 million customers in 7 states. And many of those, unfortunately, are experiencing today Hurricane Florence. So let's keep all of those customers in our thoughts today. But I will tell you that in those 7 states with 7 million customers, this is a time when we're thinking about what are the needs of those customers and how do we ensure that our grid is safe and secure and reliable. And there are an awful lot of threats, whether it's in the banking industry or just someone trying to hack into your computer system, your IT system here at NKU. That's a critical field that's going to continue to grow. And that's what I think has also set NKU on the map is your Center for Informatics. It is huge for this region. So I would say continue to boost that program as much as you can. That's really going to set this university apart.
And I'll try to answer your question maybe in a slightly different way. You asked why is there seemingly some negativity around higher education, college education, and I'm sure there's many factors. I would think one that we all see in the news a lot is the rising cost of that. The student loan debt that most of us know is sitting out there, on a lot of different heads. And then a perceived declining value in terms of the value of that degree, kind of on the street. I know that's just one aspect, but it's an aspect I connect with because I think there's a real way in for NKU in there. One of the reasons I love design is I talk about design is brutally practical. It's beautiful, it should be beautiful, but if it's only beautiful and doesn't work, that doesn't work. So there's no fluffery around design, and I think when I connect with NKU, or if I think about the brand, I would say it's a brand that has momentum. And in a world where there are those negative perceptions around higher education, there's a real way in for NKU, not just because it's affordable, although it is, but because of what NKU's had from, I think, the very beginning is a real leadership and professor and administration commitment to student success. And that means success in the real world. And so I really feel like there's something in that for NKU.
I want to pick up on that and just go one step deeper. The conversation that Dr. Vaidya references is one we find ourselves in all of the time. Will come as no surprise, as Mary and Rhonda have both talked, tech talent is our single biggest opportunity for economics in this region. And I don't just mean those working at 8451 in Kroger Digital. We need those companies in that leadership desperately, but I'm talking about the banks, Duke, the creative agencies, the law firms, you name it, because all businesses are powered by technology. And so this conversation in the last couple of years has become, the universities rightfully don't just want to create students with skills, they should be creating thinkers. However, we need thinkers who know how to learn and then enter technology and how rapidly it changes. If you teach them something when they're freshmen in college, by the time they're graduating, it's not relevant anymore. So the key is what's in the middle there, and are you creating learners? One of the pieces that I've zeroed in on, and I think does tie very nicely with NKU, is the word grit. You can come to this university, you can work your tail off, no matter who you are, where you're coming from, and you can learn how to learn, and you can learn how to unlearn and then relearn, and you can learn how to look around and do some things differently. That is a big, giant, in-demand conversation right now from employers. And I'll give you one tiny example that involves me, but only because it replicates time and again in a lot of different ways that I hope you appreciate. When I graduated from Chase Law School, which has always been known as the lawyer's law school, right? You learn how to practice law there. Lay that down next to other law schools that are really about legal theory and how do you think through. And we did that at Chase, for sure, but we also learned how to try a case, and we learned how to draft a contract. And when I started my first year at the Frost Brown Todd law firm, I started with another woman who had graduated from Harvard Law. Big talent, right? And so we both started on the same track in litigation, and it became a little bit of a joke. We would get new cases, and when you're young, they give you some small cases to figure out. She would come to my door every time with her new case and just look at me. And the joke became, I would say, "Come here, my little Harvard friend, let me teach you how to practice law." And it was known throughout the firm that the Chase grads knew how to get this done. It didn't mean we didn't know how to think and convert and learn and engage, but we knew how to get in there and get it done, and employers need that now in spades. We have between 2,000 and 3,000 open tech jobs right now in our region. That is only going to quadruple over the next 10 years. I'll stop there.
Very good.
Awesome. Thank you. I would say the biggest advantage to college is truly the social experience and how that molds you as a person. The experience that you have there, you're kind of out on your own for your first time. You learn a lot about yourself, and I think that's a key point that we've got to understand in these students is that they're going through a lot, and we need to be able to ask them the tough questions and understand really what's going on in their mind. The other piece about NKU that I think is a critical advantage, and at least it was an advantage for me, is kind of erring on the idea of the college debt. I was one of the lucky, fortunate folks to be able to graduate without debt. And that is the biggest advantage that I have amongst anyone else because it allowed me to go out and create economy, not join economy. And the debt makes you join economy, and you're forced to go get a job versus create a path, create a job. So we need to understand how we can lower the tuition costs, help fund the students to get through school, because ultimately, when you're forced to graduate, and the worst thing you have to do is go get a job, and you have to interview, and you have to do things that don't follow your passion and don't allow you to be truly who you are, then you're kind of put in a box right out of graduation. So if there's a way that we can, figure out how to help people get into what they're passionate about quicker, and I think that's through P3, what we talked about earlier, through the partnerships and getting them engaged and doing real work experience, because as the world moves more and more digital, a lot of the workforce is going to get replaced, and we've got to be very cognizant of that. And what's truly going to benefit are those with the people skills and the ability to problem solve and the ability to think on their feet and be able to make decisions. And the technology is creating less problem solvers. I can solve any problem by Google right now, and kids need to be able to learn, problem solving, real human interaction and human conversation. And I think that's, hopefully what all of you, are leading and challenging these students to get out and have conversation and to really push the region forward. As far as NKU as a brand, I'd say the brand is humble, but I feel we need to be humbly aggressive, and we need to kind of go, we're remaining humble, that is key, but we need to be aggressive in the region and really go after it and compete at the highest level and not feel like we're the little guy fighting anymore. Go toe-to-toe in the ring, and really, fight up in the weight class. So that would be my thoughts.
Well, fascinating, by the way. I just want to think through all this. Let me, if I may, probe a little bit more on the notion of brand, because I think it's tied so much to identity, right? I mean, we're trying to get to the who are we from your lens kind of perspective, and certainly as a newcomer, I'm really enjoying this notion of what that is. So here's what I picked up a little bit: innovation, momentum, grit, and humbleness. I'm trying to make sense of that a little bit. This is open to anyone. What is emerging as that identity that you speak of? What is coming out from this perspective? Are these all mutually exclusive, or do they all somehow make sense? This is what people think about NKU.
I'll jump right in. I think they are, as you said those, I was saying, yeah, like those all fit perfectly together. You're not going to innovate unless you know how to get in there and get it done. The grit comes with it. I think when you're working with true grit, you are being innovative, but you're also just doing what you're doing. You're not looking around looking for applause. You're saying, I see a problem that needs to be solved, and I'm going to figure out how to solve it. Josh makes a good point, and in some regard, we're guilty of this across the region, that we're really good at a lot of things, and we just keep doing it, and we don't care necessarily if people recognize it. But NKU at this 50-year point, I think it's there are a lot of people in the community who, like, their head sort of spins when they look at whether it's informatics or the new medical school. It's like, wow, that's not the NKU that at least I thought I knew. But here it's been building into this whole new future, and oh, guess what? It is the future. And so it's right here, and I think they all just weave right together.
Good.
Yeah, I think you're right. There are symbols, I think, on NKU that Sarah talked about some of the new centers, the Innovation Center, the Healthcare Center, that really do drive reconsideration. But I agree that I think all of those things work together. I talk about the notion a lot that there's no room for arrogance in design, because design is always done for someone else, and arrogance is very self-centered and self-focused. And I think NKU's like that. The humility is not necessarily, oh, we're not as good as the Harvard grads, because, you can often run circles around them, but the humility is that we're focused on our students and our students' success and what we can do for our larger community, and that's the right kind of humility, I think.
And I would add that I think NKU is one of the maybe few colleges in this region that is really flexible, appears to be flexible, because if you think about over the last 10, 15 years, look at the programming that has come out of NKU, thinking ahead about what those key high demand sectors are in our region and in our MSA. And when you look at those key sectors, they are advanced manufacturing, advanced logistics, health sciences, IT, financial services, right? And so if you think about that, the Health Innovation Center, fits directly with what we see as a high demand sector here. The Center for Informatics fits directly with what we see here in this region as a need for the high demand growth. And so, for a college to be nimble in this environment is very important. In this market, it's very important. As Jill said, things are changing so rapidly. What you might be teaching a freshman, by the time they graduate, something has changed in the industry or the market already to advance the need for that student and their skills. And so that, to me, is something critical that NKU needs to continue to stay focused on. What are the high demand sectors? How are those sectors changing? And what does that look like for the next 5 to 10 years? And then how do you produce that product that we all need in the workforce?
Sarah, anything else that you'd like to add on that? Let me switch gears for a second. I think this is great, and again, I'll keep some time at the end for questions from the audience. So I want to switch a little bit to sort of what, from your point of view, are the most pressing regional economic development needs, and how do you suggest we might align the assets of the institution with meeting those needs? So, and perhaps you can expand it beyond sort of even economic needs and other things. Maybe Jill, I'm going to turn to you to start off.
You and Mary must have schemed ahead of time. Mary looked at me and said, you're taking this one. Go big picture for just a minute in the pressing needs. We talked about tech talent, but I want to go one step higher than that. Economic development in a continuous stream of new jobs being added is 1,000% critical to what will take us into our future. So this momentum that everybody feels in the region right now is real, and it needs to continue building on itself. It doesn't all just build organically, though, so we have to reach out and grab and bring new jobs and add jobs here. What we know is that unlike in past years, maybe a decade ago, talent used to follow the jobs. Where are the jobs? We'll move to the cities where the jobs are. It is reversed now. Jobs are following where is the talent. And so we find ourselves in a very interesting time where living in the greater Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky region is an exciting proposition for young people for a lot of reasons. It underscores the absolute necessity of strong relationship between our universities and our business community. And we are spending a lot of time and energy with Dr. Vaidya and everybody on the team here, as well as with folks at UC and Xavier and Miami and Thomas More and Mount St. Joe and all of the other colleges to make sure that we're having a common conversation of we know what jobs are in our region and growing organically. We know where we have bench strength nationally, unlike others. Manufacturing, we are a region that makes things. We always have been, and we will continue to be that. But that doesn't just mean the actual making of those. That means the major companies, P&G is a company that makes things. Well, guess what? When a company like that is in our region, Landors are in our region, and agars are in the region, and all of these things work together. And so as we're looking, the lead right now is talent. And then when we go a little bit deeper, what we know is both because it's nationally what's happening, but also we have some particular strength here, that talent in that tech space. And that doesn't mean that everybody has to graduate with a computer science degree. We would love more of those. But what we do know is, back to the last conversation, we need to know that we have lots of students coming out. We need more students, frankly, graduating. We need more students graduating with a recognition of the need for technical abilities, and whether that means adding on some learning to their degree of love or getting the degree in that space. That is where the future of our economy lies, and the more talent that we can attract here, the better we'll do with adding the jobs, because that's what the companies are following. So we are working closely with the universities and hoping that the partnership not only creates students who will build our economy going forward, but that this conversation can help recruit more students to the universities, because net population growth is the name of the game right now.
And can I jump in there too, Jill? Because if you think back, some of you are aware that this region had an opportunity to attract Amazon's big HQ2 project, right? And one of the reasons that we know we did not fare as well as some of the other regions in that was the talent here locally. That they did not see that tech talent being as strong here in this region as in some other regions. So that's a really key point that Jill brings up. How many of you know that Duke Energy is involved in economic development? Can I see a show of hands? A few, okay. So for years, we have been engaged in economic development. We have an economic development team here locally, and actually I'm now leading that team. And we have a whole group of a business recruitment team out of Charlotte that actually works around the country in those high demand sectors that I mentioned before to attract that type of industry to our states where Duke serves customers. And so one of the biggest things that we're continuing to see is exactly what Jill touched on, and that is workforce. These prospects coming from any parts of the country or even around the world, they're asking about workforce. They want to know what the workforce is locally, and they want to know how quickly we can ramp up workforce as well. And so it's a critical piece of what we need to do as a community. The Northern Kentucky Chamber has stepped out here in this past year, and also working collaboratively with the Cincinnati Chamber, have created this new Grow Northern Kentucky effort, which is concentrating on a very comprehensive, holistic approach to workforce. So we're looking clear down into the kindergarten level to ensure that we have programs like Success by Six that can be scaled and leveraged. And in addition to that, the college and career readiness pillar is extremely important, talent, retention, and attraction. So we are really embarking on something to involve a lot of key workforce partners and all the universities here locally to help us advance and impact that talent pipeline for years to come. So, you know, a lot of the companies that come here don't want to know that, well, they certainly want to know what's the talent right now, but they also want to know what is the talent going to be in the next 5, 10 years. If we expand our business here, what does that look like? And a lot of companies that come here do end up expanding. So we've got to keep our eye on the mark and have something prepared for years to come here in this region. But I think the other thing, you had something else, Jill, that I wanted to touch on, and now I'm drawing a blank on what it was you said, but the tech talent is so critical for this region. We just can't stop thinking about, you know, how we're producing those types of students for all these different industries.
I would think that one key within the region, it would be, you know, teaching students to take risks. When you graduate from college, you don't have to go get the job at Procter & Gamble. There's a ton of small companies that, like, it may seem like you're taking a risk when you graduate, but that's what's fueling the economy. It's the small businesses that are making change and are disrupting the Procter & Gambles. Take a risk on the company that may be the next big Dollar Shave Club that completely takes off and catapults. That's what's going to drive attraction and talent. And a lot of students feel they've got to go down a certain path. They've got to go get this job with the benefits, with the 401k. When you graduate, man, that's your time to take the risk. Go for the small guy, go fight, learn what it's like when you get an account, and that helps the P&L. And if you lose that account, you may lose your job. That's real world that sometimes when you graduate and you go into a large big co, you don't get that experience right away. And I think if we can create, you know, there's tons of startups out there, and there's tons of dollars that will be invested in your idea if you just take the risk. So how can we teach students to take more risks and be comfortable with taking risks early on? And I think that's really genuinely what will help drive the economy and really attract other companies because, you know, look at Austin, Texas. There's a ton of companies that have just catapulted out of that market. And that's really key is like creating an ecosystem, and it's happening, you know, in over the Rhine, in Covington, in the core, but I think there's still that idea that, oh, I don't know if I want to go work for a startup because they might not pay me that well. Well, the education you're going to get in that year or that 2 years after graduating is going to be invaluable. So that would be one thing I would push is really, you know, taking risks upon graduation and go for the small guy.
I would agree with that, and I wanted to mention that in Northern Kentucky and Greater Cincinnati overall, we have an incredibly vibrant ecosystem for entrepreneurship. we have some incredible assets between Centrifuge, UpTech, the Northern Kentucky Innovation Network, which is now reinventing itself under an innovation or an entrepreneurship council made up of big co's. I sit on that council. We're now reimagining, and the Commonwealth of Kentucky is refunding innovation and entrepreneurship in a different way through an RFP process we're in the midst of. And we believe in Northern Kentucky, we are very well positioned because we've been at this for 15 years in various forms and building our ecosystem out. We are all collaborating across the entrepreneurship ecosystem to have one funnel, one front door for those young people or middle-aged people, whoever you are with great ideas, to come in and get either from ideation stage to I already have a business and I want to try to grow it stage. There will be, I think, a tremendous opportunity for NKU's partnership in that. You have a great advantage because Norm Damaris is leading this committee. He's obviously very tied to NKU from the Board of Regents. That will really provide a path for those students to get engaged early, understand and see kind of and taste how that feels to have equity and to have ownership and to create an idea. And I do believe that's going to drive a lot of economic growth. That is going to create the new Austin. Stay Weird is still part of Covington's. There's getting to be Keep Covington Weird. You see that, which you see in Austin all the time. It's very exciting, and we can't overlook the fact that the environment here with a new urban core and a revitalizing urban core on both sides of the river is attracting the people who want to stay here. So that's a really exciting area is in entrepreneurship.
So let me pick up that theme. I'm cognizant of the time. I know we're doing pretty okay, I think, right? 10 minutes. We might keep them a little bit longer if we can. This is a fascinating conversation. I want to pick up the theme a little bit on the entrepreneurship and risk-taking that you mentioned, and somehow tie it to the notion of the either the connectedness or the lack of that relative to messaging between the institution and the community writ large. So let me explain a little bit about what I'm thinking. You spoke about instilling in our students the ability to take risks. I will certainly argue that for many of our students, maybe most of them, taking the step towards college itself is a huge risk, right? Especially for those who are first in their families to go to college. So now you're telling us and we are telling them, oh, take even more risks after graduation, and that's okay if you lose your job. That's not. I'm thinking of my own son. I'm like, oh God, don't do that. But I think it's an important point that we need to really understand better from our perspective and the community's perspective. When you say risk-taking, how do we reconcile that message with our students and what the community and the entrepreneurship ecosystem that clearly they need? Josh, maybe?
I would say we're not too far off from, if you think about it, we're probably 5 or 6 years away from any person that was born, that would be 15 or 16, the next wave, they were born in a digital world where they immediately started thinking about their brand from the day they were born. How they look online, how they present themselves, the messaging that they put out. And that's also going to rise in the entrepreneurial field, because everyone's thinking now of how they portray themselves and how they act as a company, as a person when they're a kid. And they're into this new world of how they're presenting themselves to other people, which is a fascinating piece that times before us, we never had that. We never had to think like how we were to the world and truly think of brand building as a person at such a young age. So I think that's inherently going to start as the next wave of kids get older. They're going to be a lot more risk adverse, and it's going to drive in the entrepreneurial spirit of, you're hearing a lot about the gig economy, and being able to literally, be. I believe that in the future everyone's going to be an entrepreneur, and there'll be silos of because it's happening and building your brand very early on, and where you can just take your skill set, your brand, and be able to just find individual work over and over again and basically build a company individually. So in regards to the risk, I think, and you're very right, it was a huge risk going to college. And it was a huge risk graduating because, there's that fear, that uncomfortableness, but we also got to teach embrace being uncomfortable, because that's super important. When you're uncomfortable is when you're at the moment of making something happen. So I just feel that entrepreneurship is moving fast, and this next wave of kids who have been thinking like an entrepreneur since the day they were born, wow, that's going to be wild.
Can I jump in? And I want to ask you a question, Josh, and maybe people in the audience. Did anybody recently read the article, I think it was in the Wall Street Journal, about the Gen Zs who are on campus? So you're talking about them being cognizant of building their brand from the time they're little. I get that. It's an interesting, it's a phenomenon that we will see play out. But I was shocked to read that we're moving from a generation who has said, I don't care if I lose my job, this isn't fulfilling me, I need to go find my purpose, to a generation of kids who want financial stability. And this is their driver, and they've lived through a tough time, and they know that they need that job. But then how does that collide with what you are saying? And you're exactly right. They've learned from these things that they can do lots of things differently here, yet we know that they want financial stability. So where do those clash in your analysis?
Well, if you look at the economy, you look at financial stability in itself, that gets into more political and, helping fund populations and people, and that's it's more of a social political issue. I don't know want to get into here, but I believe that, we've got to look at the rise of technology. And I saw, Elon Musk, the Joe Rogan interview. If you actually watched the interview, it was quite enlightening. But when you talk about the future, he said a quote that I thought was rather interesting. He said, "I'd rather be an optimist and be wrong than be a pessimist and be right." And there's something about that when in the kids that are coming up, you got to be optimistic that, that they are going to be able to find the financial stability. They're going to be way smarter than they have, and they have an advantage to us because they're going to have a little AI built in. We're building the AI machine now. We don't know it, but we're building the AI machine, and it's going to help support and fund them. I'm believing in that, that through AI and through what we are all building from this second ecosystem, that it's going to be self-sustaining for all humans, hopefully.
I think, just to pick up on something I think, Mary, you said earlier, that to me is an opportunity for NKU because, and Josh, you mentioned that the ability to graduate without debt gave you the opportunity and the economic freedom to take a risk. And so the value proposition for an affordable institution like NKU is, you can get out of here without debt where you have all the options in the world. When you have $100,000 in debt, your options are limited. When you have less economic freedom, your options are limited. So the idea to have any option available to you, big co, small co, new co, to me, that is a very attractive value proposition. And to provide an affordable education, one that has grit, one that teaches you how to get things done and have critical thinking skills, one that can patch you in, hopefully, as you're a student into the entrepreneurship ecosystem, so you at least get a taste and a feel for it while you're a student. That's a huge opportunity. Not everybody is cut out for risk. That is not everybody's MO, thank God, because I need a bunch of nurses to be really low-risk people.
Risk-averse.
And risk-averse, yeah. These are the people that... And
I would refine the risk word to almost be more innovation or creativity. And I'm sure a lot of people here know and love Sir Ken Robinson as I do. I think he still has the most listened to TED Talk ever. But I think the most important thing NKU needs to do is what we're all articulating is rise up to the challenge of what does it mean to educate in today's environment. And he has a very simple definition of creativity, which is original ideas that have value. So I would be encouraging students and trying to develop students that truly develop their original thinking capacities, their naturally human capacity for creativity. Creativity is not just being able to draw or paint or play an instrument. Those are all skills and certainly creative outlets, but creativity is really in the mind. I can't remember if it was at Einstein's definition or whatever, but being able to look at something everybody else is seeing and think something that no one else has ever thought. I mean, I think that's the type of student that we need to create. That's the type of employee I know that we need, in the future, whether it's a startup, a big co or anything else, but really maximizing the creative capacities of the students. And again, not creativity in what people kind of used to think of as that
Right.
word, but in a very broad way.
Yeah.
And I would add to that, I think that's great. It's risk or creativity, however we want to look at it. The key is that for students to be able to experience that, they need experiential learning as well, not just classroom time. And I think as a community, we've really got to figure out how to ramp up apprenticeships and internships in this region. That to me is really valuable to students. And I know anytime at Duke that we've had an intern or a co-op, it leads to an opportunity for that student. But we need more of that. And we need it not only at the collegiate level, we need to really start thinking about our high schools and how we really ramp this up in this region. Again, back to Grow Northern Kentucky through the Chamber, that's one of the things we're working on that we really hope to scale in the next year. But here at the collegiate level, that is something that I think you could, that's something hard and fast that you could really start to focus on and really ramp up.
So this is a good segue. I want to get down to the last comment from each of you on this, because it's a perfect thing about sort of looking ahead, looking a few years ahead. What might be, and it could be, I like what you said, Mary, about original ideas that have value. So what could be one or two opportunities you think NKU should consider as part of its thinking about that future? And then secondly, this is where I'm hoping you can be a little bit honest, brutally so if so. What is missing? What are things we should be improving? What are things we're not hearing, or things we should be doing differently from NKU? So I've heard a lot of good things, obviously, but also areas where we should say, hey, take a look at this and rethink that objective. So maybe one or two key opportunities you see in the horizon, and then a couple of things to say, you folks should rethink some of these things, or maybe your messaging, or maybe something else. So I'll leave that. Maybe Mary, I'll start with you in the middle, and then we can go.
I'm glad you started with me, because I did not create the definition of creativity, original ideas that have value. Sir Ken Robinson, I always attribute. But I do think it's a great definition because it's very simple. There's universities now that have whole studies and degrees on creative learning and creative studies, and I'm sure there's a place for that. But I think one of the things that we can do, because you made the point earlier, Jill, what we're teaching students now, especially from a technology standpoint, is probably going to be redundant, by the time they graduate. That doesn't mean that wasn't useful to teach it. Knowledge is cumulative. We have to build on it. But again, that capacity to think. So I would challenge you to think of every single program, every single college, and say, how is that ability to think generatively, imaginatively, imagine what's next. We talk a lot about the concept of do better. I want to do what we do now and do it better than anybody else, but also do different. How do we really imagine the future and think about what it is that we're going to need to develop and innovate there? So I would challenge you to put that innovation studies, creative capacity study, because then we truly are going to create students that are able to face the future. And perhaps that is the one thing to add into the brand too, because there is and again, it's a latent and I think unfair judgment or thought about NKU. In the old days, the concrete campus, right, this or that, which seems the opposite of fluidity and creativity and innovation. And it doesn't matter if you're healthcare, the types of business Josh and I are in, Duke Energy, we need innovators and we need people that can think on their feet. So helping NKU get more credit for, just being a bit more innovative, creative, and fluid, I think would be important.
Jill?
Yeah, I would say go big. It's a great platform, and I want to follow on Mary, and go big in a way that recognizes not only what you have, but what it can be. If you pause for a minute and think about the vital importance of what is happening in business and what students need to be learning on campus, you guys have an opportunity to lead that conversation, and it's not sitting back and saying, we're going to wait and see what's happening in the business world. What happens in the business world comes from people like the disruptors, one sitting next to me, who came out of university and said, this isn't the way the world is supposed to look. It's supposed to look like this. And then they start building it. So I would encourage you to, in some regard, flip on its head, appreciate the real importance of understanding and knowing and being connected with what is happening in the business community. Where's the future? Where is the need? But as you build these, I think every one of your students should come out tech-enabled, meaning how is this going to work in a tech world, and am I open to changing a little bit of what I do? But understand that you're building the people who will build it. So push on them and be really bold about what you're asking of them, and pushing them to lead at this level so that they can make it happen later.
And I'd like to add to that, you know, there's a lot of talk and definitely much need of the experiential learning and taking students into the community to where they learn. But I think there's the future is to actually reverse engineer that. And you're hearing companies talk, you know, we're working on a project with Walmart where they're creating a Walmart campus. How funny, you know, and their whole goal is to bring the public in. So how can we as a university reverse engineer that, where it seems like it's only a place where students and faculty and academics go, with the exception of sports, that's when the public comes in. But how do you create a campus where the public is integrated into it? Will there ever be an office building on a campus that companies are, you know, renting office space from? How can you reverse engineer and have the public coming onto campus in many different ways? I think that's going to be the future of education, where it's kind of flipped on its head, and companies may be on campus, there may be restaurants on campus that the public comes to and dines at, and it really creates a unique synergy where the students and community is integrated into one.
And I'm going to say, I would challenge all of you. I would challenge you to not just stay in your classroom and to get out in this region, I mean, individually. If you are teaching at the Center for Informatics, just as an example, are you aware of Duke Energy's, of our Envision Center? And if you're not, that's something that is our smart grid technology national demonstration site for all of our 7 states in the country. So if you're not aware of that, come out of your classroom, come see us at the Envision Center. But there are so many innovative organizations and just, you know, various companies that you could visit here in this region to learn more about the impact of the high demand sector or the ecosystem, the entrepreneurship ecosystem. Have you visited Centrifuge? You know, have you gotten out to some of the chambers functions to hear some of the speakers that are here in the region talking about national trends? So that's my challenge to you, is connect to this region and find ways to help connect your students then in turn to the region as well. We want to retain your students here, right? We would love to see 100% of these students stay here in this region and not move elsewhere. So how much do they know about the quality of life here? Do they know about ArtsWave being the largest funded arts fund in the country and what our arts scene is like here in this region? Do they understand United Way and the impact it's having on our region as well? So to me, it's about engaging you as well in our community as much as we can. And we're open to doing that. The business sector is open to doing that. We would love to connect you wherever we can. So let us help you with that.
A couple things. I think certainly in health sciences, one thing that NKU has done very well is the public-private partnership. Our partnership with St. Elizabeth in all of the different areas, you know, that's relatively recent. You guys are 50 years old. We're 157 years old. These partnerships are really over the last 5 years, right? So that's a pretty short history. So more of those, I think, in building on those. I'd say a couple things about opportunities. And one is, I don't know the stats. I know that 70%, I think, of NKU graduates do stay in the region, but I think that your catchment area in terms of students you're drawing to your campus is fairly regional. Why is that? Because I will tell you, and we experienced this in the HQ2 proposal with Amazon, we don't have enough workers here. We need more population. We need more people to want to come and live here and work here and stay here. So what can NKU do to attract people from outside of our region? What can they do to attract people from outside of our nation and bring here? This is a wonderful place to live. Its vibrancy is growing every day. There is affordable housing here. And so if you, there's a great I've met so many people who've moved from Southern California or the Bay Area because they have one more child and can't afford to buy a home because it's so ridiculous. This is a great place to live. So what can we do there? The other thing I would challenge you, and you may laugh at this, but universities are not known for cross-departmental collaboration. You know, haha.
They did laugh at that. So.
They did. It's the same, you know, we see it. We always say we're glad we're not an academic medical center because AMCs, as they're called in our industry, have a hard time collaborating between orthopedics and neuroscience and whatnot. So we're glad we're a community health system because we don't have those natural barriers. You have those natural barriers. You sit in but underneath your dean in your pillar of where you are. That is not how the world works. We need people that don't just know information sciences, but we need people that know English and creative design and are in the theater program and do math and physics and business. We need people that run across the disciplines. And I've seen it even challenged with, as the HIC has emerged in its vision is to have transdisciplinary. I see NKU struggling at what does that operating model look like for us when we're sitting underneath our deans and all our pillars. So what is that going to look like organizationally for you? Look at how you're organized, how the resources get deployed across NKU, because that is how things get done in large organizations. Everything follows a budget line. And so, you know, stepping back, looking at your capital allocation processes, rethinking all of that. I know this sounds crazy, but those things drive action in large organizations. And so I would challenge you to not just think about the little strategies you want to implement, but think about how yourselves are organized to really think differently.
Very good. I know we went a little bit over, but if you'll indulge me just a few minutes more, I want to leave at least a few minutes for any questions from the audience. We don't have, I don't think we have mics, but if you want to just, we do have mics, even better. So if there's a couple of questions from the audience, we can go another 8 or 9 minutes, hopefully. So, Valerie, back there.
So I noticed when you were talking about what was important for the student experience, all of your responses were about the traditional 18-year-old person who's going off to college, graduating straight from high school. I learned yesterday that makes up only about 30% of our student body. So most of our students are not the so-called traditional student. One of the conversations we've been having at NKU for, well, I've been here 2 months, so at least 2 months, but I suspect longer, is how to think about college in a different way. That is, it's a lifelong learning process. So how do we open our campus to adult learners, to people who have gone off and founded a company and now they need a new skill or something like that? I'm wondering does this resonate with you? Does this sound like a ridiculous idea? How would it fit in with your experiences? Are we barking up the wrong tree here? Something like that. Thanks.
I'll jump in quickly there because I think when you look at the school districts here just in Northern Kentucky, we do not have enough students coming out of high school to fill the jobs and the demand that we're seeing for the next few years. So we've got to figure out another way to tap our economy, whether it's the underserved population, the underemployed. We've got to think creatively. We've got to think about veterans who are maybe unemployed. We need to think about those who need a second chance coming out of the prison system even. I mean, we've got to get creative here if we're going to make this work because we need more bodies. And we really don't have the type of net migration that we need to see. And we also have something that here in the Northern Kentucky region, we have a higher labor participation rate, if you will, than the state of Kentucky, and it's even higher than the national average. But what that means is there's still a portion of the population that we've got to tap who are, many of which maybe they don't really think they can go after a college degree or a certification. Somehow we've got to do a better job of promoting that and advertising that here locally. We need to think collectively about how do we get that message out? How do we let retirees know that there may still be a place in the market for them as well? For many of them, there likely is a place. So there is a great opportunity. What we have to figure out is how do we communicate that and make that something exciting to someone maybe who's just retired, or someone who has been maybe sitting at home and not working for 30 years, but maybe they have a degree and they need to freshen that degree up. There's an awful lot of opportunity, I think, that we have here.
Let me jump in and thank you for your question, because there is a lot of this kind of conversation going on right now, and it comes back to, Josh made a reference earlier that we have a lot of people in the workforce right now, and their jobs are either going away and in most cases turning into something else that is tech-enabled. So there is a existing population of in the workforce people who are saying, uh-oh, what's next for me, because I see where my company's headed. We are actively working with a number of partners, including some folks here at NKU, to say, how can we build some programming? You guys have already done a great job of thinking through certificates. So if I'm an employer and I know you already have your bachelor's degree or whatever you have, I don't need you to have another bachelor's degree. I need to know that you've learned this particular skill, so a certificate works well. But it's coming together to creatively say, how do we both serve NKU's goals of creating the talent and leading the way, and the real practical issue that jobs are turning into tech-enabled jobs, and we have a huge part of that well-employed workforce who are terrified of technology and what that is going to bring to their life. So you guys are at the table, and I thank you for that, and I would encourage you, from whatever seat you sit, to continue thinking about where are those opportunities and how can you do things a little bit differently to help us convert some of our existing talent into talent of the future.
One thing I would add is we really need to think differently about those non-traditional students as people tend to think of them, though. I mean, the people that do this really well, and I had referenced this earlier in a smaller conversation with the University of Southern New Hampshire, you know, they have a service delivery system for those non-traditional learners, because once they're ready to do it, they're not going to come on campus. They're not going to wait for an enrollment. You know, once they're ready, they have a service thing. If you fill out something online, they will get back to you within 3 minutes. 3 minutes is the length of time, because that person is ready to take the step now. They finally said, I need to have that certificate to be able to become a supervisor for my environmental service job, or whatever they're trying to do. So the response and the consumer orientation that an institution needs to have to serve that non-traditional population is very different than a traditional university delivery system. And so I'm not familiar with NKU's online courses. I'm not familiar with how much you have online versus traditional campus-based learning. But I would say that to serve those different segments well, you just have to look different.
Can I give one more example here of that non-traditional market? But I want to jump back to the underemployed, because I think we have a lot of underemployed in this region, and I'm going to actually share an example of my own son. So he has a year of college under his belt. That's it. And he's been out of school now for 3 years, and he's still trying to decide what does he want to do. And he's confused, and he's been working in the food industry, not making a lot of money, and he is, at this point in his stage, he's starting to think, well, what do I want to do, and how do I get back into this mode of college? At the same time, we've got a really unique program that's been started by the United Way and Partners for a Competitive Workforce, and it's called Career Bridge. And it's something they're just piloting under this new Grow Northern Kentucky model that we're doing, and it's very exciting. What they're doing is they're tapping that underemployed market, specifically right now in the food service industry. So they've paired up with Dunkin' Donuts and Chick-fil-A, and they have in turn paired up with several manufacturers in the region, about 5 of them on both sides of the river, who have said, find us some students, or not students, but find us some underemployed individuals in your stores who are interested in advanced manufacturing. And Dunkin' Donuts and Chick-fil-A, if you will provide your training benefits and have the student agree that they'll stay with you for the next 1 to 2 years, we'll let you know the type of training that we need in the local colleges from these students, or the type of certificate we need. We'll work with that student, and as that student stays on board for you, so you've secured that employee for the next year or 2, they will be using your benefit to train, but we will offer them a job when they get through the training that we need. And it's an opportunity for these students to basically, or not students, but again, the underemployed, to say, you know, maybe I've been working in food service for a while, I'm just not getting anywhere. Here's an opportunity for me to bridge that gap and have an employer on the other side who is willing to hire me. Think about how this could operate if we tapped Amazon and their employees that we know typically have a turnover rate of maybe 2 years. But if we could train them into some of these other high-demand sectors, maybe it's IT, maybe it's, and maybe it's even tapping the hospitality network here locally too, to say, you know, are there individuals who have great customer service skills and great soft skills, and they show up on time, and they're drug-free, and they're, you know, there are all these attributes that employers are looking for, but we're trying to figure out how do you connect those underemployed that really want to do something else into other industries here. That's where the colleges can really step up and say, hey, we want to be a part of that. Let's figure out how we get some of those underemployed into our cybersecurity program or into our health sciences program. It's a kind of unique model, and I'm really anxious to see where it goes. But right now, we think there are great applications for it.
Very good. Yes, go ahead.
I'm from the English department, so I'm very happy to hear you say that you want employees who have English, like have skills in writing. But one of the challenge, and what you're saying about employers wanting this is not something as a faculty member I don't know. My challenge is that I get students, and the great thing about this region is very family-oriented, but that also means their family really influences their choices at university. And so I get students who are afraid to change their major to the humanities because of what their parents might say, who say, well, I've always been told, for example, with an English degree, all I can be is a high school teacher, which, quite honestly, there's nothing wrong with being a high school teacher. Those high school teachers send their students to us. So there's nothing to put down that position, but there are other things we can do. So I guess what I want to ask to challenge you is how can we get the business community to come in and talk to our students and their parents to say that actually we want people who are cross-disciplinary. We don't want someone who can only do cybersecurity but can't communicate what they know about it to other people in the company or to our clients or whatever. So.
I mean, one of the powers of a university and an institution like this is the power to convene. So if you ask, I mean, someone asked us to be here this morning. This isn't our day job. I'm personally happy to do it. I think anybody, I've never been asked. I'm actually kind of surprised. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer of the healthcare system. No one's ever asked me to be an adjunct faculty member. No one's ever asked me to come into a class and teach a strategic planning course. That seems odd to me. Maybe they think I'm not a very good strategic planner. I don't know. But I thought, well, that's really odd that no one's ever just, you know, said, Sarah, would you mind?
Where is HR? Can we just
No, but, you know, but the reach out has to be there. And maybe it's those relationship building moments. But I think if you had, and I was thinking very tactically, like, you know, why NKU could have their own TED Talk series and expose the students to the different innovative companies. I mean, probably people didn't know that Duke had this center, and, you know, just convene people, set up the program, people will show up.
Couldn't agree more.
I'm inviting you. I teach the English studies course in the spring. It's Monday and Wednesday.
That's great.
I would love for you to come and tell my students that they have a job.
But I could also have, you know, the director of communications for St. Elizabeth or the head of my digital marketing team come in and say, you know, your skills are highly valued in the digital world.
That's fantastic.
That's right.
Content creation is everything right
And
now.
I will add there too. I mean, I think for how do we expect you to know what we have in our companies, right? So we have departments that are so unique and very eclectic, if you will. So, you know, we've got everything from government affairs specialists that are lobbying, and they have to know how to articulate or how to prepare a proposal internally to understand what kind of legislation, you know, we're trying to fight or that we're trying to advance. Or we have communications department that crafts so much, whether it's speeches or, you know, working with reporters. We've got so many different internal departments that a lot of students in particular would never guess what we offer.
But that's my challenge, is that
Yes.
many of the faculty are like myself
Right. Well, and absolutely. Again, that's where I challenge you too. How can you connect to the chambers, for example, where you're going to interact with all these different businesses in the region and understand what opportunities are out there? The flip side of that, invite us in. It's just a matter of asking us. Just like Sarah, I didn't realize that that you have a business week and that you offer an opportunity for students to hear businesses come in on a panel and discuss the very thing you're talking about. And so next week, I'm coming in with a couple of our Duke associates from different areas of the company and joining a few other community business partners, and we're going to talk to those students about opportunities and career choices. It's just convenient.
There could be, and I love English, I love literature. If I would have just studied one thing my entire college, it would have been that. But it's opportunities for innovation even here. I'm not saying that we shouldn't call English courses, but the reality is you're not teaching the English language. And so I do think there's an opportunity to reframe what English and literature can do. I mean, we're moving. I live in a graphic world, obviously. I love how things look. But increasingly, from a marketing and consumer perspective, we're moving into a verbal world. Alexa, I need. Siri, this or that. And so we have a whole, offering that's just about sound design and everything else. So actually, I think what you're teaching is more relevant than ever. And I think if we can put that into the context or construct of really it is, and many times it's understanding, extracting meaning from the written word and or being able to organize information in a way that somebody else can understand exactly what you mean. Now that's relevant to every single person up here. And so just even an opportunity to change what we call courses or how we describe. And again, I haven't looked at that, so I'm not picking on you in particular, but everything's an opportunity.
Sorry, go ahead.
Can I offer a very practical, what can get to this for all of you in the room? And admittedly, it's a little bit of a commercial, but it's well intended. In a month, we have the second annual The Big College event. It is designed for students at our local colleges and universities to come to the Duke Energy Convention Center, where they can engage with employers and say, if this is my degree, what do you think? There are employers there are pieces of the region to show students what their life can be here, where do they engage, where's their tribe, to help them understand the community. But very importantly, there are lots of employers there who want to engage with the students. They'll do mock interviews, but they'll also have some really frank conversations with your students. Do you love this? Let me tell you what this looks like as a career and all of these things you might not be thinking about. So put it on your radar and send your students.
Very good. I feel that we could probably continue this conversation till 2 p.m. So really, on behalf of everyone here, but on behalf of NKU in general, thank you for taking some time out. I suspect this might not be the only time you're going to be called into these kinds of things, but I think we've just really enjoyed having all of you here. So thank you so much. Okay. So we're going to, the next, and I forgot to put up the agenda the last time, but you have the agenda up there. We're going to spend the next maybe, let's see, 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes at most. We may have to cut short the other break. I think most of you may have already done that. But this was the time to do a little bit of a debrief and then to really spend some time outlining the strategic framework process. And I thought I'm going to skip the debrief part simply because if we get into that again, we'll spend a lot of time. I could sense the energy and the questions, and I think it was great. I'm really glad that everyone was active and engaged in the conversation. We will have some time later on, especially after the student panel, to over lunch to really do some of the synthesis, and we'll be able to sort of put together what we heard from the two panels together, and I think that might be helpful. So I'm going to skip that part and go straight into the strategic framework portion here, and then see if I got this right. Okay. So what I wanted to spend a little bit of time on, and this is maybe the shorter version, if you will, of what I shared with the campus at Fall Convocation, about sort of the strategic framework process, but wanted to give you kind of an update on where we are, and then maybe again, hopefully use a little bit of time to get some quick feedback on any questions or issues that you may have to sort of point us in the right direction. So Just a reminder, this is, I framed a lot of my conversation and comments at fall, really going back to sort of the legacy, the history of our, a young history, if I may say so, of our founders and their sort of guidance to us. To keep our spirit alive, we must do the following things. And just again, our core values, make sure student learning remains our focus, be open to new and different ways of doing things. We've certainly been privy to that, but also heard that again from the panel, and then be committed to serving the broader community, in which, of course, we brought a small segment of that here in this audience and this panel. What I mentioned to you was, as we begin the building of the strategic framework, based on all the things I've been hearing, all the things I've been listening to, both in the last couple of months since I've been here, but also occasionally as I was coming in the transition time, it became clear about certain things. And I don't want to repeat everything, but really having too many initiatives and goals is probably counterproductive. Let's be focused on a few things and do them well. How do we really align the core mission of our work by also becoming a most financially sustainable institution given these turbulent times? These are all the messages I kept hearing. And after quite a bit of those conversations, what I'm proposing is that really the framework will be built around a singular purpose over the next several years on advancing student success aligned with regional needs. We have a lot of work to do over the next several months about filling out that framework, but it will typically involve focusing our attention on those three key elements. I keep calling them buckets, but I'm sure we can come up with better ideas or better terms over the course of the next several weeks and months. But the three buckets are about access. What are we doing relative to improve and making sure more people from the Commonwealth of Kentucky, more people from around the state, and from certainly what I heard earlier today, for more people around the world to have access to a great college education that NKU offers. Degree, a certificate, a credential. So making sure we do that, and that examines and that opens up the door to lots of different things, not only working with our K through 12 and community college partners, but other things. We heard a lot about non-traditional. What does that mean? How do we go after that audience? And of course, we have a great deal of history with that. The second piece of that is the completion agenda. At the core, and this is kind of what I believe in, at the core of this rhetoric, the national rhetoric about college and the value proposition, is because we have a lot of work to do, not just NKU, but state colleges and universities around the country have a lot of work to do in terms of fulfilling the completion agenda. In other words, we are bringing students in. We are not somehow making sure that more of them are graduating in a timely manner, right? Nationally, if we were to really say that the state college and universities' 6-year graduation rate is 50%, 6-year graduation rate is 50%, and NKU's rate, unfortunately, is even lower than that. Most people would say that means 1 or 2 people are failing, which is in fact exactly right. And that's an indictment on all of us, right? On all of us and in finding better ways to make that happen. So the completion agenda has to be at the forefront of our work. What could we do better? How can we help make improvements in that? And then the third bucket, or the third piece, if you will, is on career success, making sure that our students, regardless of their major, really feel that they are being prepared for that career ladder, for that career success, and knowing fully well, and of course it was emphasized again, that they will change jobs several times, they will change careers several times, they may even change a lot of different things. How do we help them, paraphrasing I think what I heard this morning, how do we help them learn, unlearn, relearn, if you will, so that they're constantly thinking about that next opportunity and to take advantage of that. So I proposed this at the fall convocation, that we're really going to embrace that new and different thing, that approach. And that new and different thing is even an approach to building the strategic framework. In fact, we're being somewhat reticent of even using the word strategic planning, because people start rolling their eyes when we start saying that. It's like, yep, that's just another plan that's going to sit on the shelf, and no one's going to pay attention to it. So we're using the notion of building a strategic framework. And over the next 6 months, we're going to talk about how will we build the strategic framework in conjunction with all the stakeholders that we have, students, clearly alumni, faculty, staff, and members of the community, to define those goals within those buckets I spoke about. But using the approach of something called the three-box solution, which was proposed as a way to think about a strategy for future innovation. Just to remind those folks who may not have seen that, the three boxes. Number one, box one is managing the present. How do we make sure that we have optimized our current level of performance? The speaker mentioned that the box one has to do with closing the performance gap. So if we aspire to be, and I put that bold number out at convocation, if we want to say we want a 70% six-year graduation rate for Northern Kentucky University, how do we close that gap? What do we have to do now in order to close that gap? Managing the present, managing the effectiveness of the current state of student success is box one. Box two, little unusual, as I certainly discovered, and we're going to learn about that together, is forgetting the past, which means what are those behaviors, attitudes, policies, procedures, bureaucratic stuff that we have that is preventing us from thinking about the next big thing or the future innovation of fuel? What are those kinds of aspects of our work, maybe even activities that we've just sort of keep doing, even though perhaps they may not be as effective as we'd like, so that we can stop doing some of those things and redirect our attention to the ones that really make the most impact for our students. So forgetting the past is box two, and then of course, creating the future. And this is where the challenge comes in for most organizations, is that you not only have to manage your current, but you thinking about the future as well. I gave the analogy at convocation about, at the time when we were talking about crossing the Atlantic and building ships, and the focus was on building faster and more efficient ships, which of course we have to do. But then what about are we thinking about the airplane? Are we thinking about building that new mode of transportation, something completely different? Is someone spending some time and effort on doing that, or are we just focused on the here and now and thinking about that? How do we begin creating the future that starts today? It starts, as time goes on. What's that going to happen? Because in a few years, the future will already be here, and we need to do this. I think NKU's is history and legacy with being that nimble, and we heard that from our community as well. Being that nimble institution, I think, bodes well for this. So I will admit up front, this is a novel approach. I've done strategic planning at multiple institutions in my past. We have never used this kind of approach. That may not give a lot of confidence to many of you, but I hope with everyone's good work here that we will see a great deal of success. My hope really is that this part of this process, a spillover benefit, if you will, of this process is a way to both energize all our constituents, our faculty, staff, our students, and our alumni community in rethinking NKU. We heard some wonderful things about what that brand of NKU is. What do people think of when they think of NKU? And I was fascinated to hear some of that, certainly as a newcomer, but I'm sure many of you who've been around here for a few years could also maybe relate to some of what you heard. But so using the process itself to build awareness and a sense of what this is. I'd like to make sure the community understands what we're doing and why we're doing it, so that they can be meaningful partners in this conversation. So that's the goal, certainly, of this process. As I shared with you during the convocation, built into this process is the other expectation that we have, which is we're going to pilot some things. We're going to try and test new ideas, new initiatives, new projects. And if they work, we'll scale them up. If they don't, we're going to say, you know what? We tried, we learned something from this, and we're going to move on. And so reminding us that, strategic plan is not just a plan, it's actually doing things as well and moving from there. What you may not be able to see fully or very clearly there is a beginning of a communication and engagement approach, if you will, of how we'd like to do this. And we've mentioned the community, the staff, the faculty, the students, and the alumni in this process. And we'll put this up a little bit more in detail as we get But the idea is to really both make sure people understand the process, as I said a few minutes ago, provide feedback, which is going to be meaningful for us, also to forge new working relationships. One of the offshoots of this process is something that I heard earlier, is maybe this process we will talk about some of those cross-divisional, cross-departmental, cross-disciplinary interactions that may come about. You know, how do we partner with IT in a different way that maybe we haven't before? Or what about facilities? And think about that in a very different way. So building upon that sort of idea, we'll engaging community staff, faculty, and students, and then we've identified different ways of engaging them. We will unveil a website that will be the face of this process going forward in the next couple of weeks. We'll do some sort of a survey, and we're still thinking about all those aspects in the next week or two. We will certainly have open forums, listening sessions, targeted focus groups, and think through all the different ways. We talked a lot about communication norms of Northern Kentucky. Is it simply emails? Is it just stuff that comes out of the 8th floor? Is it more engaging? And I certainly want to hear from you about ways in which we can improve that. So certainly about looking at engaging our work together. Along with this is a communications plan. What I was hearing in the last couple of months, and certainly in the many of the listening sessions I was in, maybe one of the areas we have to work on harder is on better communication with each other, across areas, different forms, and so on and so forth. So we're talking about really making sure that throughout this process, we don't lose sight of that communication piece, back and forth. The milestones along the way, what are the key communication engagement strategies we'll use as we do some of that work. And a little bit later on, you'll get a little bit more taste on some of that as well. So we're going to put some of this down as well and talk about how we can work better at a communications plan going forward. What can you do? Well, this is something I mentioned earlier as well. This is how we want to, whoops, let me not go so quickly about that. Things that we have to do as we think about the process, as we build out the strategic framework. What are those big, bold student success goals around access, completion, and career success that we want to try, we want to test, we want to think through? There'll be some thinking behind that. How do we actually get to those goals? How much do we need to know about our students and the persona that we create for our students? How well do we know their hopes and aspirations? And maybe a little bit of what the student panel will do later on is give us a glimpse of that, just as the community panel did. We have to develop milestones and metrics for accountability. That's something that I think we have to have the discipline to do, and I know we've done that really well in the past. What are those projects and actionable steps that we want for execution in each of the different boxes? We're going to try and get to those through this process as well. And then, of course, never lose sight of the fact that we're keeping the students at the center of our thinking as we go this. This is one of the commitments that we've made. We want to create a collaborative, transparent process that engages, empowers all of us to action. Planning is all very good, but if it's not followed with action, it doesn't really get us very far. We know that. We've seen elements of it. I'm not too concerned about that, frankly, largely because of our history. I've looked at all these amazing things you've been able to do over these last several decades, and it is remarkable. And every time I get some new examples of how sometimes I think what I'm hearing more is that we don't get the story out as much as we should. All the great work that happens here sometimes still stays under the rug. And even I would suspect many of our panelists are not fully aware of some of the truly remarkable work that we do in conjunction with our students in the community, that they would be surprised. I'm sure we could counter to Rhonda's point about, do you know how much some of our, for instance, fresh in my mind is the Student Philanthropy Project in those classes, what our students are doing in those respects, and the true nature of the Center for Environmental Restoration, and so many other things that maybe we need to get the word out a little bit more on. And so anyway, I know we have work to do here. I want to make sure that we understand that there will be a bandwidth with prudent risk-taking and acceptance of failure that I think that has to come with this. If we don't take risks, and we certainly heard that we need to challenge our students to take more risks, we have to challenge ourselves to be open to that notion as well. Make sure we communicate frequently, multiple ways and celebrate those successes together. And the last, but certainly not the least, is an area that I want to make sure stays at the forefront of our thinking, is aligning our resources, our structures, our policies, our procedures, our incentives for strategy execution. When an organization is truly aligned in that way, then we know that good things will happen. And we're going to be asking ourselves some hard questions. Do we reward our faculty and staff for advancing student success? How do we know that? How do we ensure that happens across the board? And we're going to have to re-examine and be pretty honest about ourselves with respect to that aspect. What are those policies and procedures? And maybe some of this is part of the box 2 conversation. What are some of the things we've always put in there, but we need to go back and revisit? I'd like to take a moment to just introduce you. I don't know if you can see that, but let's introduce to you. We've put together the core team for the strategic framework building process. I mentioned this to you a little while ago. We're going to have a small team, and that will do the big work of facilitation, of listening, of synthesizing, of engaging, using multiple aspects of design thinking tools and other ways of doing that. We'll get a preview of that later on today as well. So I'm really pleased. I want to thank all these individuals ahead of time. They're going to be working on behalf of all of us. As you can see, if you can see the names, we have several folks from different constituents. Kevin Kirby will be the sort of dean representative, although once you come onto the core team, you forget all those titles. That's what I'm going to insist, and I'm going to say that in the first meeting. This was sort of the preview of getting there, but now you're part and parcel of the core team. Doug Hume, I know that some of these individuals are here. The Council of Chairs put forward his name as the Department Chair of Sociology, Anthropology, and Philosophy will be there. Matthew Zakade, I know he was here for a little bit, will be back as the Faculty Senate President will be on it. Caroline Mackey, I know she's teaching today and couldn't make it. Professor in Social Work will be on it, along with George Copton. I think I saw George earlier right here. Our faculty in music will be here. Danny Moore, I know Danny is here from Student Affairs. Sue Murphy-Angel, I know I'd seen her back there. Yes, she'll be here, of course. Sue, of course, you came onto the team as part of being Staff Congress President, but now, of course, you're part of the team, and so that's how we'll work forward. We have Taylor Gagne. I don't think Taylor is here. Taylor, very good. Thank you. I haven't met you yet, but thank you for agreeing to be here. He's our undergraduate student and is majoring, I believe, in accounting and business, so sports business. So I'm glad to have you on board as well. Kadori is our graduate student. I know she couldn't be here today. She's pursuing her master's in nursing and actually was a bachelor's, a graduate of our bachelor's in nursing program. And some of you might recall she was the 2016 commencement speaker at commencement a couple of years ago. And I had a chance to meet with her a couple of times. She's on it. We do have 2 members of the community. They both happen to be alums as well. Kara Williams, I think Kara might be joining us later on today. I'm not sure. And then Lisa Blank from St. Elizabeth. Kara is the founder of Marketing Collective. She has also been the member of the NKU Foundation and does a lot of strategy work, but is a great supporter of the institution, along with Lisa, who happens to be at St. Elizabeth, who I'm told is a 3-time alum of Northern Kentucky University. So I'm really energized and pleased that all these individuals have agreed to step forward in this role, and I want to thank them. You'll be seeing a lot of them going forward as well. So hopefully this will be a way in which we do this. There is a second group that I mentioned at Convocation that we're putting together as well. A very important group. I'm calling it the resource/advisory/consulting team, if you will. And these are individuals from across campus that both have an interest and particular maybe subject matter expertise in different elements of this. This group will be called upon to provide resource, advice, consulting help on a variety of issues that will come up. There is no real limitation to that. We have a data team that's, of course, part of that work, but we'll engage a lot of other people. I believe the email went out earlier this week to engage in people if you're interested in serving on that, please send your names to Ben Jagger by Monday, I believe, because we want to get that group together as well. And again, this will be a resource, folks. We have a lot of incredible talent on campus. that I'm just discovering, and I want to make sure we tap into that for providing advice. And it could be from anything about what's some of the national best practices, or maybe evaluating the financial implications of doing something, or something else, as the case may be. And that group will be tapped in trying to put together some of the background information that we will need in order to really build out that strategic framework. So a lot of good work that will happen over the next several months. I want to maybe just end with a reminder that we already have a mission statement that you can see up here. And the question I really had for the group, and I'm mindful because of, I want to make sure we transition, but we do have a little bit of extra time, and I'm going to cut short that recess time because we kind of already had that. There is a question about whether we should re-examine or revisit, if you will, our mission, vision, core values, and promise statement. Is it still appropriate? Is it not? And I thought we'd begin with this really group. So I'm going to go through the slides and then come back to this, if you will. So that was our mission statement. This is our vision statement. I'm not going to read it out to you, but you can see that there. And then these are our core values and our promise statement. Promise is not something normally that you would see at most institutionals, but it's there. It says we promise to put students first, to lead with excellence, and to make a lasting impact. It's kind of a commitment, if you will. So, I've given you a lot to kind of, let me go back to mission maybe. We have several in the audience that, let's go back here. Okay. So let me pause there for a second and get some quick feedback. First and foremost, any questions about the framework, the process, any words of advice? We have many members of our core team as well up here. Things that you'd like to share with us at this point. Anything from the framework, building process, timeline, communication, engagement, anything that you think, hey, just keep that in mind, or let's not forget about this, or maybe if there's a question about something else. There'll probably be many questions going forward, but let me just spend a few minutes seeing if there are some general questions that we can answer up front about some of these as we go forward. And we have folks at the back there that can have microphones if you need them. Any questions on process, framework, building out, anything that's sort of on your mind right now? Everyone still comfortable with the 6-month deal? Yep, okay, we're gonna make it happen. Other questions, pitfalls we should avoid, things that we should be careful about? Again, I mean, this is just an initial, this is a shy group. I didn't realize this was, you don't want me to call out people, do you? Tamara was very vocal during the panel stage. She's very quiet now.
I say what I said before. I know we have a tight budget, and it's important that we balance our budget. I have a projector. I have a professor voice. But I would ask that whatever we do, we keep our students front and center, that there has to be a point at which that as much as we need to balance budget, we need to run on a very lean pile of money, that we still put our students first. Because that's what I've seen with the budget crisis, things that have changed, that we are now looking at, can we afford everything, which is very important, but at the same time thinking about opportunities like the people who were speaking this morning. How do we get our students out to internships? How do we get them to come and work with us? And that might take a bit.
Right, absolutely. And this is something that is not surprising at all, but I think the good aspect of really focusing on this singular purpose hopefully sort of starts clearing out the things, and this is where we're going to have to challenge ourselves, really. What are the absolute essential things we must be doing, and then some of the things we've always done. But I think the beauty in this is, and most of you have already figured that out, is that when we do this well, and we do it even better, even from the managing the present box one aspect of it, it actually helps us from a financial sustainability standpoint. I mean, I wasn't making up those numbers, right? Sean, you're going to back me up on that. If we can do a 70% six-year graduation rate, and if we commit to that for some reason, over the next 4 years, we bring in an additional $10 million. That's not just numbers made up. It has specific implications for how we do things, may have to do things differently. But part of the outcome, part of the goal would be not just, it's the right thing to do, but what the outcome would be is building those partnerships, I think, diversifies our revenue stream in some ways, because now we think about different ways in which we engage. I thought I heard something from Josh about how do you bring it's one thing for us to go in the community and students go, how do we bring the community onto campus? How about we co-locate business and industry right here and do something differently on that front? So the opportunities are endless, that's for sure. So there's a question here and then up here, yeah.
Which is student success. Oh, thank you. And how we move forward in terms of even our effectiveness. This will relate more to the box 2, which is forgetting the past. I think moving forward, we should really keep in mind having a strategic plan that would align more and be more integrative of multiple initiatives we have. And I'm saying this because I'm sure every one of us heard something related to, having too many plans or, plan fatigue, that people even sometimes can't remember which plan I'm responding to or which report I'm filling out. So if that strategic plan, as we move forward, could just integrate more of those initiatives and be really something that would tie to them, I think it would help for not our effectiveness, but it would also help us really spend time for really focusing on that student success, which is the core of our mission. Right. And it will also help us make our initiative, because we have great things happening, but I think because of those multiple plans floating around, it becomes very difficult to make visible and communicate about our achievements and the things we're trying to do. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Tron?
I'm going to go back to something that Sarah said on the panel, and that is working in teams and training our students to work in teams, breaking down the barriers of departments and colleges, and how do we work across that from a budgetary perspective and be cost effective in training our students to make them stronger when they graduate. Yeah. I take it from the healthcare perspective, but nobody works in a silo. So how do we train our students with the informatics students, even with the social work students, with the health comm students? What can we do to train them so that when they go out into the workforce, they are ready to not only work in the teams, but to lead the teams, and training them to be leaders within their units, leaders within the hospital, and leaders within the region. So I think focusing on that is really important.
Very good. Good.
I don't know if it matters. So one thing is, on this, fulfilling careers and meaningful lives, I'd like to change meaningful lives, and I know all the English people, I'm not a good sentence person, but I would like it to be lifelong learning. That's what they set up there, meaningful lives. I don't know, me finding meaning in my life, I don't know that we can do that. It's kind of a weird process. I would rather have it and be lifelong learners, and something in there about being fully educated, not just that. I am tech, and I recognize the need for more than that in our students when they leave. So I don't know, that's just my top thing. But then piggybacking on what Gannon said, I think that leadership option, as well as that idea, and Kevin and I have been talking about it, that the majors is developing a course in the major that's tech with our department, somehow offering that so students don't have to come and take a Java class, which is meant for computer sciences, but they could take in accounting, whatever the software is they use in accounting, a programming class. And in math, they have a programming class that uses SAS. None of us, I do because I did math, but she won't let me teach it. So, But I mean, I haven't asked. But I mean, they have
We
programming
talked about
in math.
cross-departmental collaboration, right?
Yeah, and no, but I think it's important, and I think that thing about being tech-enabled would give that. And I also agree with the breaking down boundaries from the cost model of not having to worry about who's teaching what, but that the students are getting taught.
Good. Back there. Laura.
I very much like the three-box solution approach. What I would like to know or encourage or hope the team considers is box 2, how will you encourage those who will then work with their departments in their areas to forget the past as appropriate? I'm all about that, but I can tell you I work with a number of folks who are kind of stuck sometimes. I think that's understandable, but it's easy to say this is what we're going to do, but how are we going to help those folks align with you and the big picture here?
Yep.
I think that would be a challenge.
It's a great question, Laura. I think, by the way, the author himself, I think, mentions in the book, and I think in the presentation, if I can remember, said the same thing, that even for organizations that supposedly are all about creativity and innovation and so on, that box 2 is the biggest challenge. So we should take some comfort in the fact that we are somewhat nervous about that box 2 is not misplaced, because all those organizations and there are some ways in which you can get to how do we both uncover those issues, and how do we overcome them, that I think might be somewhat helpful for us to figure out. What are some of those behaviors, patterns? How do we do that? And we don't, I mean, certainly we don't have all the answers right now, and that's what we will have to figure out together. But I think one of the areas that may be pointing us to that direction is the alignment question. And the alignment question is, we really do have to say, are we really? And it seems like a very simple thing, but it's not, as many of you know, most of you know, that it's, yes, you can have a great plan, a great idea, a great vision, but the execution is where most organizations fall short, right? Knowledge is not the problem, it's the we have an implementation problem. Public higher ed in particular has an implementation problem right now. And so, and we have way too many smart people to allow that to happen. I'm not trying to be facetious here. This is an organization that should be built for outstanding performance. And we have a way to reclaim that narrative. NKU is in a great position, to be honest, much better than other institutions around the country. That's the beauty, that's the best part from my vantage point. But we have a lot of work to do. Right.
I think in line with that and thinking about that box number 2, I think it's just being very smart and intentional about how we look at, forgetting the past. I mean, I think there's some elements of our experience in our units that we have some history of things that could be smart to be thinking about. But at the same time, if there's practices, maybe 2 offices that maybe in the past didn't work well together, maybe we need to now to be able to enact the positive change we want to act, to keeping the students in mind as the focus. So I think if we keep the students in mind as the focus, forget the past of things that, may not have worked in the past, and be willing to, set aside differences or things like that. I think distinguishing some of the elements of that box will help make that process a little bit easier.
Very good, very good. I'm careful of the time. I know that we have a little bit of a presentation on some situational work that has to happen. This question about the mission statement and the vision statement, most of you know this, but the mission statement is sort of supposed to encapture why we exist, right? What's our purpose? Why do we exist? And I mean, this is not a very long mission statement, but because I know there are some institutions that have pages and pages of mission, and it's like after the second paragraph, we've lost track of that. So yes, we don't want to wordsmith necessarily, but I think during the course of this process, we'll have to find a way to get some input on whether this is still a relevant mission statement. Does it really capture our reason for existence? And if not, what do we have to tweak and what do we have to do? So just something for you to keep at the back of your minds as you think about this. Does it capture that, not from a wordsmithing standpoint, but is the essence of why we exist captured in that statement or not? And then of course the vision, as you know, is about the aspirational, right? What do we want to be? Does that capture it in most people's minds? So we'll have these conversations with our stakeholders, also with our alumni and our community members, to see if does that make really some sense. I don't think this is what should consume most of our time, but at the same time, having it at the back of my mind saying, yep, maybe it's time to revisit that, or maybe it's not. And again, this will, I think, evolve organically through the conversations that we have over the next several months.